Hello, everyone, and welcome to a crossover edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast and the Strictly Stripes podcast. I'm Dan Labbe, and I'm joined today by Ashley Bastock and also Andrew Gillis, who covers the Bengals for cleveland.com. Andrew, welcome to our Orange and Brown Talk feed. It's been a little while.
Been a little while. Thanks for having me on. Hopefully, I don't screw this up too bad or turn anybody away from an off-season edition of this. So hopefully people enjoy this. This will be fun.
Yeah, so we're kind of introducing Andrew here to our drafts that we do here in the off season as we kind of try and fill some time before training camp. And what we're going to do today is we're going to draft position groups in the AFC North. So pretty straightforward. You could draft a team's wide receivers, a team's offensive line, a team's defensive line. Just a couple things that to keep in mind. We're separating wide receivers and tight ends. Pretty obvious there. We're doing full secondaries, so not cornerbacks and safeties. It's just full secondaries. And we are not doing quarterbacks. That's the really important thing in this draft. So we're not looking at the quarterback rooms at all. Every position group is on the table. We can draft multiple position groups if we want. And really, this is the first year we've done the position group draft, so I'm sure there'll be some surprise. We're just kind of making it up as we go. So bear with us there. I have the draft lottery generator up on my screen. I'm going to hit submit, and we'll have our draft order here shortly. Pick 1 is going to be Andrew. Pick 2 is going to be Ashley, and I will have the third pick. I think since there's only 3 of us, we'll just do a straight draft. We won't make this a snake. So, Andrew, you're up. You get to go number 1 overall.
Wow, I feel like I just got Victor Wembanyama. This was hard. As you kind of mentioned the rules of this, I was kind of thinking like, oh God, I have to pick a position group in the AFC North now. The thing that I found was that I was trying to find a reason not to take the Bengals receivers. I didn't want to seem like a homer. I didn't want to come across as, oh, here's this Cincinnati guy taking the Bengals, but I'm going to take the Bengals receivers first. Especially when you consider positional value in the league, you've got one of the best receivers in the game in Jamar Chase. I think you've got one of the most criminally underrated receivers in the game in T. Higgins. I mean, you're talking about a guy who would be a number 1 receiver. I mean, he would be a number 1 receiver in Cleveland. He would be a number 1 receiver in Baltimore. I think he would be the number 1 receiver in Pittsburgh over Pickens. Like you're talking about a guy who would be the number 1 in a lot of different places. I think T. Higgins is really, really good. And then you add Tyler Boyd in the slot. I mean, that's a luxury that teams sometimes don't even have for their number 2 receiver. They just drafted Charlie Jones in the 4th round. He's their kind of 4th option, and I think he's kind of a nice little underneath route for Joe Burrow. So yeah, Bengals receivers, I feel really good about that. Again, I was looking for a reason to not pick them, and I just couldn't find one.
Well, if you're trying to avoid the homer thing, I can tell you that I had the Bengals on the top of my board. Ashley, did you have the Bengals number 1?
Yeah, that was like kind of the obvious answer, I think, for me. So don't worry, Andrew. We are in agreement with you here. I think there's kind of no denying that it's. I think I tried to weigh positional value as well, so that was part of my reasoning. And I mean, I think it's the deepest and most tested receiver room in the division. So I think this is the correct pick here.
All right, I'm glad I don't have this pick. Ashley, you are up at number 2.
Yeah, I hate having this pick, and I am also going to have to make the case for not being a homer. And before I make this pick, I will say there were 2 other position groups on the Browns that I think overall are maybe more talented, but because of positional value, I have to take the Browns D-line. And I think here, and I don't know, Dan, if you were even going this route, I was between the Browns D-line and the Steelers D-line. And how do you decipher between the two? When PFF did their positional rankings, the Steelers were 5, the Browns were 6 in this group. I think what's interesting about this, and I think part of the reason why they put the Browns beneath the Steelers is because a lot of these guys are new. But for me, why I'm putting them above the Steelers is because I think it's going to work, number 1. And I think this is the best defensive line Myles Garrett has played with, which we did talk about on a recent podcast overall. And I think they have more depth than the Steelers, especially when you consider like Cam Hayward, he's really good, but he's getting up there in age. He's 34 now. You have to have Alex Highsmith have another big year again. TJ Watt, had a good year, but still not his best year because of that injury. So I'm going to go with the Browns D-line here because I think what they can do with Zadarius Smith is going to be key in this defense. The fact that they can move him around. I think this defensive line is going to have a chance to put up some really big numbers with this, what we've already seen from this scheme and Jim Schwartz. So that's kind of what led me to my decision. And, Myles Garrett, always the PFF darling over here. We just did a whole podcast recently about how we think Myles Garrett can have a career year. And if that happens for me, I'm riding with this defensive line this year.
I'll go number 3 here, and I guess I'll be the only non-homer on the podcast. I am going to go ahead and take the Steelers defensive line here. It was going to be them or another group. It actually wasn't going to be the Browns defensive line as my other option here, but I'll take the Steelers D-line third. Again, TJ Watt starts there, former defensive player of the year. Had a little bit of a down year last year, of course, was dealing with injuries as well, but we've all seen the way that he can wreck games. Mentioned Alex Highsmith as well. 14 and a half sacks last year, kind of a breakout year for him. And to me, Ashley, this is a guy that we've talked a lot about on this podcast. The difference maker here to me is Cam Hayward. He's not a guy that gets talked about as much among the elite defensive tackles in the game, but even, now in his mid 30s, he's still one of those elite interior defenders. And I think he's kind of the separator for me when I talk about these defensive lines. All right, so we've got Bengals wide receivers 1, Browns D-line 2, Steelers D-line 3. So, Andrew, you're up at number 4.
Yeah, well, I'm taking a risk here because I'm going to pick a Browns position group. So, I'm ready to be absolutely told why I'm wrong by you guys. Hopefully, you'll tell me why I'm right. Like Ashley and I talked about, I kind of struggled with positional value here. There were some positions where you look at, well, is this more important than the other, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to go Browns offensive line next. I just think an offensive line is so critical in the league. You obviously, I took the Bengals receivers, first, but if you don't have anyone blocking for you up front, sometimes you'll have Joe Burrow, like, he's seen in Cincinnati running for his life. I just think with, you have Batonio there, you have Wyatt Teller. I know they were banged up last year. They have the center's name, Posich or whatever that I can't pronounce. They've got Wills and Conklin. Like, it's a unit that most teams in the league would be very, very envious to have. They obviously run block very well. They've got some help behind them with Nick Chubb. They're just a really, really solid unit. And I feel good about taking them, both kind of positional value included and kind of talent of the unit overall.
Okay, so Ashley, you are up now at number 5, following the Browns O-line pick.
Yeah, so I am once again, I think, going to be a homer because I can't justify leaving Nick Chubb on the board still. Now, the argument to take the Browns running back room lower this year would be it has lost depth, right? Kareem Hunt's no longer here unless something crazy happens. Dearness Johnson is gone. But Nick Chubb, I think, is still arguably the best running back in the game. He's an elusive runner. He's a powerful runner. I think he alone carries the weight of this room, kind of regardless of what else they would maybe do, kind of regardless of what happens with Jerome Ford. And I will say I was between them and a Ravens position, the Ravens secondary, actually. But that group kind of took so long to come together last year, even though it has higher positional value. I'm not as comfortable doing the projection there because I'm not watching those guys every day the same way I am with the Browns D-line. But I think Browns running backs have to go here based on Nick Chubb alone.
Okay, so Ashley kind of alluded to this, one of the positions that she was thinking about. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab our first Ravens group off the board. I'm going to go ahead and take that Ravens defensive backfield. They were slow last year to kind of come around, but I still think that's a really good group. You've still got Marlon Humphrey there. I actually really like their safeties. They've got Kyle Hamilton in his second year. I think he's that's just such a Ravens pick. I love it from 2 drafts ago. And I just trust this group to kind of pick up where they left off last year. I think this is the best secondary in the North. Now, some Browns fans might hear this and want to make a case for the Browns. And again, I think a lot of that is projection more than like a Ravens team that has actually done it consistently. So I'm going to take our first Ravens position off the board here at number 6 to end the second round.